quote, "I understand how, I do not understand why." He wondered, as he had many times wondered before, whether he himself was a lunatic. Perhaps a lunatic was simply a minority of one. At one time it had been a sign of madness to believe that the earth goes round the sun. Today, to believe that the past is inalterable. He might be alone in holding that belief, and if alone, then a lunatic. But the thought of being a lunatic did not greatly trouble him. The horror was that he might also be wrong. He picked up the children's history book and looked at the portrait of Big Brother which formed its frontispiece. The hypnotic eyes gazed into his own. It was as though some huge force were pressing down upon you, something that penetrated inside your skull, battering against your brain, frightening you out of your beliefs, persuading you, almost, to deny the evidence of your senses. In the end, the party would announce that 2 and 2 made 5, and you would have to believe it. It was inevitable that they should make the claim sooner or later. The logic of their position demanded it. Not merely the validity of experience, but the very existence of external reality was tacitly denied by their philosophy. The heresy of heresies was common sense, and that was terrifying. And what was terrifying was not that they would kill you for thinking otherwise, but they might be right. For, after all, how do we know that 2 and 2 make 4? Or that the force of gravity works, or that the past is interchangeable? If both the past and the external world exist only in the mind, and if the mind itself is controllable, what then? But no, his courage seemed suddenly to stiffen of its own accord. The face of O'Brien, not called up by any obvious association, had floated in his mind. He knew with more certainty than before that O'Brien was on his side. He was writing the diary for O'Brien, to O'Brien. It was like an interminable letter which no one would ever read, but which was addressed to a particular person and took its color from that fact. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. His heart sank as he thought of the enormous power arrayed against him, the ease with which any party intellectual would overthrow him in debate, the subtle arguments which he would not be able to understand, much less answer. And yet he was in the right. They were wrong, and he was right. The obvious, the silly, the true had got to be defended. Truisms are true. Hold on to that. The solid world exists. Its laws do not change. Stones are hard. Water is wet. Objects unsupported fall towards the earth's center. With the feeling that he was speaking to O'Brien, and also that he was setting forth an important axiom, he wrote, "Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 plus 2 makes 4. If that is granted, all else follows." George Orwell, 1984, Part 1, Chapter 7. Ever since I was a kid, I do the was it Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget, you know?
Next time, Gadget. Next time.
Sorry, my brain dead. What are we talking about?
You brought up Tube and the Decline of Conversation, or something like that.
Yeah, so here's what I was thinking, just off the top of my head. We'll riff a bit. In the old days, you used to have like orators, right? And people would stand up in groups of people or at a dinner table or a party or whatever. Like even if it was in a university, they would have galas and dinners and people would make speeches. Speeches and oratory was a form of communication, not just for the sake of communicating, but also for the sake of educating. You get the people who know about something that you trust to say things that are competent, to express them and convey them to everybody else. And then when people got literate, we started writing essays and books and treatises because everybody could do it. And then it was like the formal debate. And we had formal debates where you actually listen to the other side, not just barking at them and yelling back and forth, but like a pointed structure so that both opinions actually got vocalized and articulated. It wasn't about a one-sided win. It was about getting the message out so that people could think for themselves and decide who won the debate. But like now that we have YouTube, every idiot sits in front of a camera and everybody's got this equal playing field, which I know we've talked about before. But like Sam Harris just released a video of like getting all pissy at his followers because they were mad at him for not inviting like Steve Bannon on his show. And he's like, but the guy just makes stuff up. There's nothing to argue with the person who says things that just aren't verifiably true.
Even if he doesn't So it's what's the guy's name? Sam Harris doesn't need to. He doesn't need to talk to everyone that his
Yeah,
fans want. And like, I don't know,
it's
Sam
his
Harris is.
platform.
Yeah,
If you don't
exactly.
like it, fuck off.
Yeah, it's like you should talk to this guy, and he's like, "Who?" It's like, "Why don't you know who he is?" Because it's not like I'm Sam Harris. I don't need to talk to every Steve that's out there. Today's episode is brought to you by Tank Racing. Go to your local racetrack and ask if they have tank races. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Frivolous Gravitas. We are back from our hiatus, mostly because Christmas happened and New Year's, and Chris lost his voice. That's okay. He's got it half back, so he's not going to be yelling at us today. Today we will be
the mime thing the entire episode.
Yeah, he's got this kind of. He's got it's kind of like it. It sounds dignified. So today we're going to be talking about
Sound like a 90-year-old pimp.
Exactly. Dignified.
This is fine.
This is fine. Hello, welcome back to Frivolous Gravitas after our short hiatus due to Christmas and travel and, the wonderful world that is winter in Canada. Today we're going to be talking about YouTube, but more, I guess, directly, I think we're going to be talking about public discourse and how it kind of works, how it's changed with YouTube, and kind of where it came from in the beginning too, which is because there's some interesting historical ways of getting messages across that we can talk about today. But mostly we're going to be talking about how YouTube's changed public discourse, maybe for the worse, probably for the worse, maybe for the better. It's definitely not as bad as Twitter or Reddit, but that it does have its problems. So I think, where do we want to begin?
Maybe start with like old literature and like letters and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
It used to be that a bunch of like the intellectuals and the scientists and the academic community used to write like professional sort of letters to each other, complete with like descriptions and equations and sort of outlining their thought patterns and processes as they thought about important stuff. So whether it's politics or astrophysics or cosmology or religion or whatever, everybody was philosophizing about science. And the way they communicated that was through thoughtful prose, oftentimes. So I think what we used to have is, like before everybody was literate, it was just like public speakers and elders and, church leaders and stuff who would pontificate. And they were basically the best people suited for that job, right? They were the ones who thought most or most deeply or who were most informed about all of these subjects. And we sort of all relied upon their collective understanding between each other and their engagements with each other to ourselves glean insights and understanding from complex material that we obviously didn't have time to all read for ourselves, because not everybody can be an astrophysicist, right? But everybody's interested in space, so it's really important to have like communicators about cosmology and space. And you see, all kinds of documentaries and Brian Cox and Carl Sagan and all the greats that we've talked about already.
Well, that's interesting right there that you bring up those guys, because they are like, especially Brian Cox. Carl Sagan had a different idiom, but it's not much different. But what you're seeing is that you have this you know what, nuts to this. It's not going to make sense if I don't just get into Marshall McLuhan, because essentially what we're going to be, the crux of, I think, what we're going to be arguing, what you're arguing, is that the medium is the message. And the medium changes. If the medium changes, the message changes to some extent. That doesn't mean different stuff's getting said, because the content isn't necessarily always the message. Go read Understanding Media by Marshall McLuhan. It's actually a wacky, fun book. You do have to pay attention. It's not an easy one, but it's worth reading. Now, in the past, when you get those guys those philosophers and those natural philosophers, pre-science, what we call science, in the early Enlightenment, the reason a lot of times because the medium is the message, what they were doing was the best they could. They couldn't just go across Germany or from Scotland to Italy to be like, why did you write this equation like this? And they'd have to settle for a letter. Now, a letter is now the medium is the message. So the communication is inherently limited by the medium itself. So if you have a paper and you have only a set amount of papers, because you can't send a book because it costs more because things are more expensive in the past. And well, stuff's worth more money. Yeah, just because it has more numbers on it doesn't mean it's actually more expensive. You had to
see our economics episode.
So bigger number doesn't always mean more value. But so you send a letter off from Scotland where you're doing your Scottish Enlightenment stuff, and you send it off to Italy where there's a couple scientists Italy had some interesting thinkers back then. And what happens is you're limited to the word usage. So you have to think carefully about it. That's the first thing. You have to think carefully about what you're going to be putting down, just like any form of writing. You stop and you like, what do I say? Well, you know what you want to say. The first thing about writing is have something to say, but you have a limited amount of space. You have a limited amount of time. You have to also be aware that the length of time of transmission is so much longer. So you have to at least give something that's not going to be out of date by the time it gets there. For example, the third chapter of my thesis is feces, because it's completely out of date by now. It was out of date about 6 months after I wrote it. First chapter is fine. Second chapter is getting a bit stale, but it's still applicable. So transmission length is important. Now you get something like, this was after the print, the print, right? So if you think of something like before the printed word, you had books, but they were very expensive. You had to kill like 30 sheep to get enough vellum to write a small book.
But it also wasn't accessible. Like people weren't able to just go to a library or go online and download a book, right? So
most books were even not only not accessible, they were hidden.
Yeah. So what was more important to the public then would be people discussing a book that the public hadn't read.
Well, you had things called criers. Well, in English we call them criers, but in Rome in the Middle Ages, and I don't know about Asia, but they probably had something similar, where someone would literally stand up in the middle of the most market square and just tell the news. There's a really good scene in the Rome miniseries where this large, wonderfully enunciating orator just goes out there and be like, "It is the Jews' holy time. All mockery of them and their one God shall be kept to an appropriate minimum." And, this is how they got information across back then. Someone would just go out there and talk loudly for all day. And that was the medium they had, because you can't just go and read a book or read a pamphlet like you could in the Enlightenment or now. And that was one way of getting the mass media out. That was the message, as Marshall McLuhan.
There's a reason that worked, though. The public had to accept that person. You know what I mean? They had to accept that person being a representative of some sort, or an authority figure of some sort.
Authority is the word for it.
They did that by the way they conducted the oration, or by their relationship to the church, or to the king, or to the Lord, or whoever they were supposedly speaking the laws of.
Yeah,
right?
And
They would come to them directly, and that's what the press used to do as well. So we used to have government and businesses speak directly to the free press or to newspaper media, and the newspaper would just print whatever came to them in priority sequence, basically. But now, because you got, like, maybe I'm jumping ahead a bit, but now the media has an ad model and a revenue-based model, and they're beholden to shareholders who also want their revenues and ad models to be more proliferated in their business.
Right.
So we are
you're
less inclined now to inform people because of the system that we've designed to encourage the opposite.
right, and
And
that's
absent
that's
the press that guides the people and the public towards what makes sense or what's sensible or useful to know, we're sort of defaulting back on everybody has an equal playing field in the right to speak, which they do, but the validity of the words that they speak are being grounded equally too. And I think that's a tragedy in itself.
right. And you actually touched on a whole bunch of stuff there, and you did get a bit ahead,
I'm
but you did bring me to a you and I guess the ironic part of this is that we are actually quite
yeah, we're part of the
amateur.
problem.
No, well, we're not part of the problem. I think the thing is that we're amateurish, which means we don't hold enough as much authority, which means we have to get by on the
Merit.
quality of our words. We have to get by essentially on merit, and not just on showmanship. But one thing you brought up, and you made actually a really good example of the medium being the message, and the medium of geez, that's gonna bug me. I have to get rid of that. Yep. And the medium of the ads, it's there to do a thing. It's there to inform you in a certain way, the way it does. And when you go back to Roman times and Greek times and the Middle Ages, pre-Enlightenment, well, a lot of this, okay, let me just say pre-printing press, because the printing press is it can't express the importance of the printing press. Now, the medium being the message, you're still going to get Caesar's propaganda. You're still going to get what they want to. You're not going to hear, there's a battle over there. They might lie about who won the battle. They might lie about everything about that battle. And then they're going to have to, that's going to contend with the other way of getting stuff across. Well, there's two other ways in those.
And they definitely accepted money to promote businesses. Let's not get that wrong.
No,
there was advertising and shit back then too.
Our problems on YouTube and our problems in modern society, these problems aren't new.
Yeah.
I cannot stress that enough. All these new economic and media problems, they're not new, because the other two forms of getting messages across was, let's see if we can guess them, but they're graffiti. And there was so much. Go to Pompeii, look at the graffiti. It's not G-rated. And a lot of the graffiti was political in nature. Caesar's got a small wang kind of stuff. Cleopatra and Antony are, tools of
Canoodling.
Hades. Yeah, they're canoodling too much or something. And you'll see lots of this ever, but it'll be like as mundane as Titus's fish shop sells rotten fish or something, and everyone's like, oh, screw Titus.
The grain shortage is a hoax.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And the grain
did
shortage
that too, yeah.
yeah, it's called the grain dole. But what would happen was, the other thing was word of mouth. And this is kind of, you alluded to this a bit, because people would discuss it and they'd go off, and it was more of a, well, nowadays we're very segregated from each other. Individuals are very segregated from each other, quite to an amazing amount in our society.
Ironically.
Yeah. And so we have all this technology to bring us together, but it's not doing it. And we're physically segregated. We don't go to,
People don't even go to areas of town that make them uncomfortable. There are people who grow up in an entire city who have never been to 3/4 of their own city.
Yeah, but there's that. But we live very surprisingly solitary lives in our society, and well, it's not getting better with the restrictions, but that's neither here nor there. Back then, people would just be around each other 24/7, all the time, because they'd all be working with each other.
No radio, no TV.
Right. So what are you going to do? You tell each other stories. You talk about stuff. You talk about what's going on. Oh man, have you heard about what happened at Pharsalus? Yeah, no way. I can't believe Caesar won that battle. And so people will talk, and there'll be hearsay and this and that, but there'll be nothing there was no mechanism to stop hearsay, to stop to check propaganda, to look out for fake news, and none of our fake news watchers are working now, but whatever. And so what happened was, once the printing press was invented, talk was able to be corroborated by, like, oh, I heard that the king's back, and then someone pulls out a pamphlet which is probably illegal, going like, no, I have this pamphlet here which says, blah 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 blah, that the Holy Roman Emperor actually died, and there's a dispute between the Palatinate and Brandenburg or something, or Vienna is really mad at Bohemia or something like that, and this would help the gossip. And then you get people like us, and this is our historical analog, who would just be like, I've got something to say. And well, you've seen us do that. And they put it in a pamphlet, and they'd say it, and then they'd get strung up and killed. But that's neither here nor there. The thing was that they were able to say it, and if they could catch them. And so a great example of this is Martin Luther, who literally, well, just read that book that Chris recommended at Christmas, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. And a thing, he put out his theses, and he's like, the Catholic Church, the authority, literally the authority on earth.
Capital T, capital A.
Yeah. And he went to Rome. He said, this is stupid. He walked around. There was a guy selling indulgences, which is you pay to get your friends and yourself out of purgatory, which is like spiritual jail.
It's kind of like oxychloroquine for the soul.
It's kind of blackmail. Yeah. So it's metaphysical blackmail, essentially. And you pay money to get out, and he guilts you into it. And so he came up with this 95 Theses. He was a scholar. So what he did was he wrote out what he thought was wrong. You can look them up online. It's free, like, it's history. Don't be squeamish if you're a Catholic, but because your church has definitely changed since then.
All the Lutherans are like, oh my God, they're talking about us.
Yeah. All 6 Lutherans out there. No, there's lots of Lutherans. Could you chill out on the hellfire and brimstone, please?
Touch bit.
You're not as bad as the Calvinists, but just the Calvinists are just gonna DDoS me, I swear. But
they'll ride in on flaming chariots.
Yeah. Just guilt trip me. So what he did was he wrote these 95 Theses complaining about the church. Now, he didn't actually he wasn't being a revolutionary. He was literally this was a normal thing that happened every day. There were probably like 3 other notes nailed to the church. It was just the church was the center of all life in a town or city. And so everyone would see it. And the purpose was literally to start a debate. He didn't know he was going to become, the Martin Luther, king of, oh no, wait, that's a different guy. But I think the book actually made that joke.
King of slings.
He didn't even know he would become the most popular Martin Luther. But second, no, what was I saying? It was supposed to just spark an academic debate. That's all he thought it would do. He thought the local scholars would see it, be like, very interesting. Dangerous, but interesting. Let's discuss this. And he thought someone would come up and just, argue for the Catholic Church, maybe even put his misgivings to rest a bit, and maybe move the church in a positive way forward, very, very incrementally, slowly, which is the opposite of what happened. And so this way of this was the medium. You nail your questions to the church, and it starts a public debate, and people talk about it in public. And this would have been a debate that anybody would have been able to come to. Not many people would have, because most people were working, in agriculture, or doing their apprenticeship, making shoes or something, or barrels or wheels or something. But anybody who was interested could come. And they were a bit snobbish about it, because there was a lot of what do we call that, elitism, but like class elitism.
It was
Uh,
almost like exclusionary too. Like they would say
yeah,
you're not part of this group and we're not letting you be part of this group. Like it wasn't even just,
yeah,
leave it to us. It was like you can't come in.
you wouldn't understand. Yes, it's just
Yeah.
like, well,
Well,
probably
they
not,
did
but
that too with women and black people or whatever, like depending on where you were. What could you possibly understand?
yeah, and to some extent in that day, I
It
had a
was just
professor.
normal though. They didn't think twice of it.
Yeah, well, and they probably wouldn't have been wrong either, because the dietary differences alone between the nobility and the peasantry, um, like the hell, it made the reality of health different. Like the peasants would have looked up to the nobility and just seen someone who was probably better looking, able to live longer. They didn't have as many weird diseases.
Boils and
They
rashes everywhere.
they were cleaner. They were dressed better. Like these people would have seemed better to the peasantry. Now, had the peasantry been fed as much as they would, uh, yeah, that probably would have changed the way they looked too. Now, was they able to actually feed the peasantry with the technology they had then?
Absolutely
It's
not.
debatable, but probably not.
Even if they did it for one generation, they'd all have children and then they couldn't do it the next generation.
Yeah,
Like
then
it's
Malthus would actually be right. I'm sorry, I can't believe Malthus is right, but Malthus's equation would have actually played out there.
that's why
And
populations didn't explode until the early 19th century or 18th
well,
or 20th century. I mean,
for this, and this is a bit of a digression, but the Little Ice Age caused crops to fail in the 14th century, and which exacerbated people's immune systems, which made it easier for the plague to develop, which helped the plague to develop into a stronger plague. And then the wars didn't help, but
and
the
then
famines
long-term
increased
effects and then
wars.
generational effects and then
Well, generational effects are like, I don't know, generational trauma isn't really a thing.
oh, it totally is.
No, I mean like if you like all of our ancestors were slaves, let's just put it that way.
No, but during the potato famine, the next
Mhm.
generation to be born was
Yes.
way more likely to have chronic disease, and then their
Right.
kids inherited chronic disease at a much higher rate.
Right.
That type of thing.
But it diminished over the course of like two generations. You don't get like uh the Slavs aren't going around being like, oh,
Well, the reality
oh.
is we just don't have data. It doesn't mean that it
Right.
diminished. It just means that we don't know anymore.
This is a question for our local geneticist. But
But even things like volcanoes going off and causing the year of winter, right? That
mhm.
type of poor crop yield, it doesn't just happen in one year. It's the year after and the year after and the year
Yeah.
after because you weren't able to till your soils and you work as hard because you didn't have
Right.
as much energy. And when people die
It's
from plagues and there's less workers, like there's a domino cascading effect to all of these types of
right.
incidents and
And then
exogenous
some
threats.
weird bug from Persia comes out and wipes out half of Europe.
Yeah.
And
But
so
sorry,
that's a digression though.
to get back to what you were saying, I do want to object a bit. Like, I reject the notion that the medium is a message, and I know you like to say it a lot, and I sort of let it go usually because it's a tangent. But I think it's particularly relevant in today's discussion because I think it gives way too much credence to the actual medium. The medium is just, it's a catalyst, right?
Right.
So if you
And
take your medicine by water or by oil or by smoke or by whatever, if it gets in your body and does the treatment, the catalyst is irrelevant. The only time the
right.
catalyst matters is if it changes the effectiveness, right? And that's
Right.
sort of what we want to get into is how it's
So
changing the effectiveness. Having a
right.
catalyst medium like YouTube versus a catalyst medium like a university or a radio program or a reputable news
Right. So
organization.
when I'm saying the medium is a message, I don't mean that being on YouTube is going to make me say different things. It's going to allow me to say more. It's going to, but it like, this applies not just to media. It actually applies to all technology, like a shelf. He's got an example of a light bulb. The light bulb is the medium. The message is that it allows us to read at night, and the message ends up being, and the content of the message is us being able to leverage nighttime activity now. That's kind of what he's getting at. It's not a literal thing where he's saying the medium changes what you say because it influences how you say it to some, and to some extent
To
there
some
is
extent
that,
it does, and that's
but
sort of what
it's
he
more,
dwells on.
what does YouTube let us do? How does YouTube affect our actions? How does the printing press affect our actions? And
But
that's
I think
kind of,
metaphysically, it's more important to just distinguish that just in today's episode, because the medium itself is not a physical thing; it's an approach, right? Like it's a
yes,
concept of how we're approaching something,
right,
not
and
the actual item that we're using or the tool that we're using
right.
to convey our messages.
It's a technology, just like economic technologies aren't physical things.
Yeah, and books are
like,
technologies that are physical things, but the concept of reading is not physical.
right, it's like interest. Interest isn't physical. It's a thing, but it's a technology.
Yeah, I just
and
wanted to point
yeah,
out that.
yeah.
'cause
So no, I get what
matters.
you're saying, because I actually, it's a pet peeve of mine when people don't read the book and take it literally.
Yeah.
But when like people say, uh,
It's
that
just
would be
like
a digression, that
misconstruing
would be
things
annoying.
like quotes, like we talked
Yeah.
about in our other episode.
Yeah, and finding the quotes for this, we have to find a lot of misconstrued quotes. I think we found one that didn't actually belong to a guy. But where were we? Oh yes, so we were at Luther. Sorry, everybody. We were at Luther,
Don't
and
apologize. They're willfully listening.
all right. So the way they were able to best get their message across in the early Enlightenment was through pamphlets, writing letters to each other, writing books to each other. And if they could, they would travel and have a debate and have a big long thing. And, people would paint pictures of it if they were rich enough. And well, paintings are another way of conveying that stuff. But it really didn't change much. Well, it changed a bit, but mostly in refinement over the course of the next couple hundred years. You got the additions of such technologies as punctuation, spaces between words, indentations in paragraphs. Oh boy, do we take these for granted.
Dictionaries.
Yes.
You don't even use them anymore.
In the 19th
should.
century, encyclopedias and dictionaries, the ordering of information, just amazingly helped
Plural
it.
words from other languages.
Oh yeah.
Imagine how hard that would have been back in the day.
Well, yeah. Well, North America was pretty much just like, what do you call this? Connecticut. Okay, we're gonna call this place that. It's just like, we need to change the names to more indigenous names. All these names are indigenous, well, except for Edmonton, but Winnipeg is Quintupec, just anglicized. And anyway, but
Toronto, Vancouver.
most of what we had in the discourse was just an elaboration on earlier forms. And mostly you could apply that to anything. But in the 20th century, in the 19th and 20th century, something comes around where industrialization allows the media to explode. Not only, and people had no idea how to handle this. People in the 19th century, so keep going back, 18th century was when it really started, in mostly in Britain. And all of a sudden you can print whatever the heck you want. It was literally the grammatical Wild West, and Mild East in our case, but like, you could print whatever you want, say whatever you want, do whatever you want, as long as you stay within the bounds of not getting stabbed by your crown or something. And then literacy just started rising exponentially, and people started reading it, and they would buy a newspaper and then they'd take it to the bar, and the one person would read to everybody, or the same thing would happen in the family. The one person that could read would read to everybody. People were astonished about, and this is going to sound very particular, people were astonished by how much crime and death there was in the city, because they were stuck in their own little bubbles of,
but also like how big the world was,
right?
Like how there were languages. A lot of people back then didn't even know there was more than 4 or 5 languages in the world.
And when they found out, they got super interested in things like Japan,
like
Egypt,
cultures, and they just absorbed them.
Like, this is why I don't believe that people are like inherently racist, is because when they found out about this stuff, they're like, tell me everything about Russia. I didn't know it went that far. Yeah. And so you got people interested and they wanted to hear, but also at the same time, reality was scaring the living hell out of them because they didn't know that there was things. They kept thinking crime was going up. And this is a huge thing in the 18th century. Crime is going way up. There was never this much crime. No, you have newspapers now. Now you can hear about all the little crimes. And in the reverse, and this is starting to sound very familiar, because people were scared of crime and the crime that was present. In fact, crime was actually going down because of the English common law system, which was slowly being established over that century. Was
Developed
that
from Hammurabi's code, by the way.
well, that's a long pull.
Hundreds and hundreds of years prior.
It's long, but it was starting to coalesce in a kind of a bureaucratic. That's another episode. But
it's important to note that when crime was going up and people thought crime was going up, people were also becoming more aware of what their actual laws were. They didn't even know their own laws before.
Right. Well, they didn't
made them up
at this time in the 18th century. Yes, actually 18th century. I'm right. They didn't have laws written down. That's what I mean by the construction of English common law. The judges kept making precedent after precedent after precedent, and eventually they codified it all together. And they literally took, at the end of the 18th century, yes, 18th. Sorry, I keep thinking it's different century. So the 1700s. They kind of took all these precedents together and sat down for like years and just said, okay, what is going to be the overriding law code in our society? And they came up with, well, a law code that's very, very similar to what we have today. You know, every man should be treated equal, you know, guilty until no, innocent until proven guilty, unless you're in Alberta.
Or most of the world.
Yeah. And so all of this stuff that we take for granted, habeas corpus, that kind of stuff, is codified during this time. But the funny thing about it is that this was causing crime to go down. This new equal law code was causing people to actually know what the laws were, but also be aware of the punishments. But the media itself was taking this and being like, someone died, page 3, and oh, there was a stabbing. All right, get that on. There was a fight, and they wanted the juiciest stuff because sensation sells, and you want to sell papers. And the penny presses were making a killing because they could just print what people wanted to read. And a lot of that was, there was a swashbuckling affair and this. Oh, look, pirates,
but a lot of it wasn't even true. Like they would make stuff up for sensationalism because it was the Wild West, like you said. Exactly. Nobody was governing what they said in the paper. There was no slander laws or anything like that back then.
There eventually would be. But they were, well, eventually after like 100 years. You had to prove that it destroyed your
business and your livelihood, and then you had to pay for the courts, and you had to pay for the lawyer, and pay for the judges, and then you had to hope that somebody actually cared enough to take up the case.
Right. So because the judges, the courts were now impartial and not just a tool of the state, because after the revolution, they kind of separated the courts, and the courts kind of had become their own thing, which was very advantageous to everyone in Britain because, when
I think they were still appointed by royalty though, right?
Yes.
So they didn't prosecute the royals, but other than that, it was free.
Well, the royals are you can't prosecute lawyers. That wouldn't be a thing until much later.
Well, we're still working on it. Prince Andrew. Yeah.
Well, he's not doing it. He's inconsequential, luckily.
No, he's getting sued in civil court now. That's like the first time I've ever heard of it.
Yeah. So what is interesting is that you get this codification. Now one of my specialties was the papers during the Civil War, where you have, luckily what happens and starts happening is this kind of evolves out of pamphlets, and you start getting, and this happens earlier, but I remember it specifically in Civil War, where you start getting papers that hold one political aspect. So the Sun will hold one, the Times will hold another. You get the Post holding another. You get all these penny presses, these cheap rags that are printing pretty much sometimes the same thing. Sometimes you'll read one article in one, and then they'll just reprint it in another paper because who's going to check. They take it to the court, and then they pay off a little thing. Our problems are not new. And so this is from pamphlets you get into newspapers. Newspapers start to become more of uh, a like ubiquitous thing. They're not something that you do, but they are very political. So, when a newspaper claims to not be political, they're lying to you.
They
The
always
newspaper is
have been.
political. This notebook isn't political. Not everything is political, Joseph Goebbels, but the newspaper is political. And so, but the newspaper nowadays, I'm just gonna skip ahead 150 years,
Thank you.
and because nothing much happened. It just got more and more savvy with better technology, just like color and
It was refined over
ads.
time.
Yeah, it got refined into what we see it today, but it's pretty much the same animal. Less text, more pictures. Look at the monkey.
And again, important to note, we're still working on it. Like
Oh yeah, well,
Disney single-handedly changing copyright law, for instance, and Microsoft and Apple are single-handedly changing antitrust law. So it's an evolved process, and it doesn't just move in a linear direction forward. It's an evolved process that takes steps backwards and to the sides, it spins around a few times. Like it's not at all directly progressive. And a lot of
and
people get that misconception when they do talk about media and conveyance of or purveyance of information, thinking that being where we are now, that we're so automatically some type of more enlightened, more informed people. But that's not at all the case. It is entirely more plausible that at the dawn or the advent of a new technology that enables further communication, it's more likely that we'll be led astray, wildly astray, before we eventually veer back and find a common sense type of path. You know what I mean?
yeah, and I
But
think
like the faster your car goes, the more likely you are to get into high-speed car accidents before you figure out how to like get proper traction control and uh, automatic braking and sensors in your wheels for your air pressure and tire diameters and all kinds of stuff evolve as a solution
well,
to a problem that we didn't know existed when cars could only move 5 miles an hour.
and I think a lot of people look at them as a finished product too. When you get something that seems like, oh, it's this has always been like this, but also it's at its height. This is what we have, and this is it. This teleological um, construct of Platonic journalism is just
Yeah, but just
nonsense.
look at the internet.
But
Anything you
no,
look up and search, every web page has a pop-up that blocks you from seeing anything because of cookies. There's no way that's the epitome of all of
no.
civilization.
But what the thing is that it's we're still in the beta
That's
of
what I
internet
mean. Like,
technology, and they were always going to be in the beta.
but we get
Like,
this false impression that we look at the internet and say, look how amazing it is. Google finishes my sentences for me and stuff. And be like, yeah, but look at the websites it feeds you.
yeah,
Everything is an ad.
the medium is the message. You
That's
want
not
internet,
effective.
you
Like,
get this. And so what well, actually I kind of want to get into stay with paper media for just a second, because it's become absolutely irrelevant, and the companies that are clinging to it are just, in my at least in my esteem, are just continually becoming more and more irrelevant the more and more they cling to this old method and this old medium, which does restrict them, and it does keep them from, like, I'm not going to turn to page 4, like, or like go to the sports thing when I can just type in, like, Winnipeg Jets. Oh, that's the score. I move on with my life. I don't want to have to like go through ads and do all this stuff. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's forcing a lot of this legacy media to become more and more corrupt to stay relevant, and to become more and more sensational to stay relevant. And you're starting to see, and this is kind of segue into digital media, you're starting to see them being replaced by independent journalism, which is struggling because of censorship mostly. Um, to But they are more effective now. Why? And we've come kind of for a full circle here, because we started with town criers and word of mouth and writing on the side, drawing penises on the side of buildings with the word Caesar in them. And now we are back to town criers, word of mouth, and drawing penises on the side of a website with the word, Trump or Biden in it. No, same thing. And so what we've ended up with is the same thing. The same thing, but, and this is the but thing, is that it allows, and now if the medium is a message, what does it let us do? What does this technology do that's different? Well, I can, as long as someone has an internet connection, they can hear us. And we're leveraging that right now, right here. It's kind of a weird meta conversation, except we're not journalists. We're just, what are we?
Vloggers, I guess.
Oh God, no. Oh man, I almost closed this down.
Well, what's important to point out though is that because of our access to information and fact checking, even though we're not doing it, we're able to. We can make the choice now, whereas before we never could. So
Yes.
right now we're in a process of, and this is just my own opinion, but we're in a process of learning to value the importance of checking things, not just receiving things, because now we have reception in abundance. We can receive information so much that we can't even absorb it. And then we can save it in all these hard drives and store gigabytes and terabytes of it.
Yeah.
But we don't even have enough lifetime to go through all of it. Like it's
Right.
physically impossible because of how much it's grown.
That's
to
where
do
archivists
anything
come
but
in.
filter now. And
Yeah.
requiring a filter is something we haven't evolved or learned to do effectively yet. And I'm hoping that's what we do with podcasts and discourse, is it's a form of filter. It takes out it separates the wheat from the chaff, not just because of someone's opinion, but because of someone's opinion multiple times over.
Right.
And it's like a coalescing of thoughts and ideas
to
that sieves through all the garbage that you have to sift through.
I
So like
think
there's a refinement and sophistication and a focus to our engagement now that we could have never had unless we were in a university and spent our entire
Right.
lives
So-
studying in archives and stuff like that.
to build on that, is that I think that the filter is long form discussion. I think that's it.
It has
Because what I do as an archivist, or when I'm doing archivist stuff, I had to train myself to be a little more objective, to filter and see what it was, because I'm going to be looking at weird new wave art stuff. I'm going to be looking at economic records. I'm going to be looking at business records. I'm going to be looking at everything. So I have to be able to sit there, filter, look at something for what it is without the bias, without being like, oh, I got to burn this because it's someone I don't like politically, and just move ahead and do my work. I have, archive stuff that worked in a political milieu that I disagree with. It still needs to be saved, because one thing about the town crier is that if he wasn't the king's man, they could stab him. And the thing about the internet is that you can't do that. Now, long form discussion, and I kind of really harkens back to, not all the way back to town criers, but the way speeches used to be, but more, I think, allows us to be more elaborate. Because, and I think you brought this up before we started, was you used to get a speech, and one of the things about, you'll always hear about Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation is that it was short, and it was short. It's like a paragraph, and people got up there and they went, oh, the president's coming to speak, on the war and stuff after Gettysburg. So he gets up there, there's a bunch of speeches, and everyone's kind of like, that was a good speech, but that's it. Because they expected people to, and this could be apocryphal, but what was expected at the time was that speeches would last for 2, 3, 4 hours. You'd be there for an afternoon. Someone would advertise that they're coming into town to make a speech, and this is how political things would be done. Especially was, you get up there on your little podium, and you'd be like, I can't put that in there because it blocks my mic. You get up on your little podium and you'd start speaking. Why should you vote for me for president? Well, here's my 3-hour discussion with the town about it. And a politician had to be able to speak to everybody, because he doesn't know who's going to come into that hall, because
And
people
would heckle him. So
Right.
like if he was doing a bad job, you'd get all these abusive kind of comments.
Right. And
So there was
because
like
we
a
live,
public response to it
and
live.
people make fun of the Americans for being rude and stuff, but that rude, mocking, heckling behavior forced the politicians to actually try.
You ever watch British House of Commons? It's hilarious. They
Yeah.
still do it in Britain. Like,
Yeah. And so that's part of what, like, it's meant, like, democracy's messy, and it's supposed to be messy because, you know, you get a citizen who's a coal miner being like, yeah, but my son lost his job, so why should I vote for you? And they go, well, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he gives them fake promise, and he goes, yeah, I'm voting Republican this year because Lincoln's where it's at. And so, I don't, so well, that was 1860 when you would want to vote Republican. And so, this was normal, and then you'd often have debates like this. You know, you get two opposing sides show up and they'd argue at each other for 2 hours, and it sounds fun. In all honesty, it sounds engaging. Now you compare that to what media became, and like even by World War I and the 20th century, was you get people writing speeches, you get people you get 30-second sound bites, you get pictures. Pictures speak 1,000 words. It's like, yes, but tell me what happened. They only tell me a couple W's, and I want all the rest of the W's and the H too. And so you also get sensationalism, where, well, so there's also sensationalism, but you know, you get stuff like CNN, which doesn't actually do any reporting, or they don't actually do any investigative journalism. They just report on stuff that they heard on Twitter, and like the legacy media, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, they don't actually go out and do any reporting. They're just entertainment. They're news entertainment. And
it's a form of reality TV now. Like it's not
really good way of
even
putting
journalism what they're doing. They're hearing a journalist go out from the Associated Press or through Al Jazeera or BBC for
actual people with actual jobs.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then Fox will report something without any backing, and then CNN will report that a source at Fox said something, and then MSNBC will say CNN and Fox both said this.
Well, then Rachel Maddow will go up and be like, can you believe what has happened?
But the thing is, none of them are doing any of this fact checking, and it's sort of assumed and incumbent upon the listeners to do the fact checking for themselves. But where we're really failing at this information age, or this, you know, enlightenment type era that we're in, is we're assuming that they're doing all the fact checking because of how easy it is to fact check.
Right.
So everybody's got this sort of laziness mentality, and we're relying on a capitalist system that's ad motivated to fix it for us. Like, capitalism fixes a whole lot of problems with motivation and distribution of goods and reward for labor and productivity, but what it does not do well is convey information. It's one of the worst possible ways to rely on somebody for fact when their income is reliant on you believing whatever they have to say.
Luckily, the free aspect of our society allows us to do that, though.
Yeah, but that's part of the evolution we haven't caught up with yet, the fact-checking part.
Which is why I say long form. This is exactly the reason why I say long form discussion, because when you're talking for 3 hours, you know, a lot of times when you're writing a speech, they're like, this is perfectly crafted so you don't put your foot in your mouth, and they still somehow manage to put their foot in their mouth. But like, you know, you have these scientifically crafted speeches, but when you're speaking for 4 hours and the crowd expects you to just riff and just talk about, you know, their things, and see if you can't hide if you're an idiot or not. You can't hide your vocabulary. You can't hide your anything if you're sitting there and the people, you know, your speech is done and the people go, you're not done yet. And when you have an opponent that you're talking to for 3 hours, like what we try and do, or you get something like any of the long form media out there where they like have a 4-hour podcast talking about one topic, and if you have contradictions in there, it's going to become readily apparent within, you know, the first half hour.
And that is the purpose. That's the function. Like, it's not to insult people or belittle them or make them feel stupid or look stupid on TV. The whole point is to have somebody draw out and flesh out a really strong thought argument, and then
Right.
find a flaw that might tip the whole house of cards over.
That's why I hate
Because
the
then they
gotcha
have to
moment.
rethink about it too. It benefits everybody involved, even though it's a little embarrassing and uncomfortable. The whole point and purpose to it is served by people doing that type of heckling or like comments.
Mhm.
The simplest thing we could be doing with our news media, even though it's transitioning onto the internet, is allow readers to comment. And now they're starting to ban people's comments, not just
Yeah,
censor
turning
them.
off comments, turning off downvotes. Like one of the
Yeah,
things, like go to your local news. Like I don't know, Winnipeg Free Press, I'm sure has a YouTube channel. I know Edmonton Journal is.
but
You
they
know what I'll
used
do
to
if
allow
they say
comments on their
something?
websites.
I'll put a comment saying like, "Are you sure this is the best policy? Why are you doing this? Like that's not how that like the last garbage pickup company was fine. Why like
And then
any
you can
topic?"
link your references and cite your sources so everybody reading that article can read your comment and your sources.
Yeah.
That's vital. That's a way of communicating information. Because then, even if the journalist wrote something that's wrong, it's not to throw eggs and stones at them. It's a place where you can post a citation and a reference that's relevant to a well thought out idea that
Mhm.
contradicts it.
Yeah.
That's the point. But as soon
Yeah.
as you start banning stuff like downvotes or comments, or censoring people who aren't abusive but just have different ideas, or like outright just not disallowing comments, period, even though
Mhm.
it costs you absolutely nothing to do it, like the concept is broken. As soon as you do that, the concept of information gathering and soliciting is broken.
Well, that's why it
You're
seems to me like
advertising only. That's all
they're
you're doing by that point.
right, because the advertiser, when the advertiser's king, and you see a lot of, you see some people like doing that. It's like, hey, I'm advertising for this company. I don't give a crap about them. All right, let's talk about some controversial stuff. And there's a lot of companies that are advertising on, like they don't care. They're like, I want my product out there, and almost those ads are almost, I don't know. There's a couple people on YouTube that I watch to understand how to like do better firearm maintenance. Now, firearms are not popular on YouTube because guns equals bad. And so, but there's still people that will go, there's still companies that are like, an audience is an audience. Let's get out there. I want to sell my stuff. That's honest. That to me is honest. They're not trying to be like, and they're not trying to control the discourse that happens around them, which is it's folly because a lot of these companies and a lot on YouTube especially is trying to control this hydra, and which we are part of, this hydra of public opinion and public discourse. And the more you control it, the shallower it gets. And so when you have an ad that says, you know, oh, we don't want you to talk about this, or we want, they're putting pressure on YouTube to censor talk about, it's sometimes it's absolutely stupid. I don't know, like
Like you can't mention China. It's just a country
yes,
on Earth.
yeah,
Like how is
okay,
it illegal, or like in the YouTube world, illegal
okay.
to mention a country's name?
Here we go. Taiwan is a country,
Yeah.
and COVID virus came from a lab in Wuhan.
Yeah. And CSAM, LGBTQ.
Yeah.
But
What else?
here's the issue I have with it though. It's not just the overt
Nixon got
stuff like
caught.
that.
Sorry.
It's the surreptitious things too, like the research that we're not doing, the peer-reviewed research that doesn't get done because of a publish or perish model. When
Oh yeah,
people
that.
actually want to go out and do important research, but they don't have an idea that's like revolutionary, like literally those words, revolutionary,
Yeah.
they
So
should be
sick
able
of
to
that.
get published doing peer-reviewed research just to practice their craft of science. That's a very vital and important function. And we're not serving it whatsoever because we want headlines.
Yeah. I think.
Because that's how universities get endowments, is based on how many publications and citations. And then they offer tenure. So there's a for profit incentive for the researchers at the school or university to get tenure through their publications and their research. All of
Yeah.
that is just completely bastardizing the function and purpose of the institutions that we regale as being like high society, civilized humanity. Like the greatest things about human civilization, culture, and society are the things that we're shitting on for ads. And it's
Yeah.
not for ourselves to make money on the ads. It's so that like a fraction of a percentage of people can benefit from it.
Right. And so this is. I think we should just start calling this like the democratized media, because this is what we're doing right now, because when what's stopping you from doing your research and like having it even peer reviewed, like, because you don't actually need to go to a journal. You can just go up to professors in your field and be like, why don't you read my paper? And they'll be like, no. And be like, I'll give you $50. And so you get them to actually read it and like do a thing on
Because
it. And
real
then,
research costs money.
yeah, well, in like scientific research,
If you need a
could get,
lab, it costs money.
well, in the
If you need a
humanities,
supercomputer, it costs money.
in the humanities, it's a little less expensive, even though they keep claiming they need more and more money, but whatever. The the thing is that because of democratized media, if you have an idea, you can take it to YouTube, and just like any other idea, if you've done your work, well, you can get it out there. Now, getting it out there is hard. We have 20 subscribers, and well, whatever. But
No, but that's a perfectly valid point.
Mhm.
There's no reason to think that our podcast is less useful or productive than, say, not Sam Harris or whatever, because that guy's pretty smart. But
yeah.
Gamer Meld or something, like some guy who publishes videos about GPUs being, oh, there's a chip shortage. Oh, there's still a chip shortage. Oh, there's still a chip shortage. Like every day, and the guy has like thousands and thousands of views. Nothing against the guy.
Right.
That's not nearly as useful as anything we've ever produced on this channel.
Right.
So
And
like the fact that we have 20 subscribers or whatever says more about our friends and family than it does about the popularity of our content. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I think a good example of this is well, James Lindsay and the New Discourses podcast, kind of tinfoil hat if you want to go there. He does a good job of explaining how the woke stuff came about academically, and all he does is he just reads postmodernist and woke ideology and then unpacks it, and because it's all word salad. Another one is is a really good example of this is a guy called Runkle of the Bailey, who does Canadian law, and he explains Canadian law, and that's all he does. He puts a little thing, which is less work. He takes a picture, puts some orange letters on it, and then he just talks about law for 20-30 minutes and explains, like his last one was how we're going to have police want a liquor database in Edmonton. And I think, unless I'll just finish this up. And so what is happening here is that this is examples of merit-based democratic media, because a lot of these people are having to come up with their own thing. Like they have to do their own research. They have to put together everything all on their own. They maybe will hire an editor or a media guy, except the lawyer guy doesn't seem to have, maybe he doesn't have one, but it doesn't look like he puts too much effort into this thing. And they get paid democratically too, through crowdsourced money. So there's no reason you have to have this big overarching mega institution. You can be a gamer who on YouTube, I'm just looking, sorry, about some of these ones. You can have a gaming channel on YouTube, which is something worth talking about. People enjoy games. There's nothing wrong with talking about games. And there's this one guy, he plays old games, but he's got high production values because he puts the effort in. Him and probably a friend got together and said, hey, let's do a gaming channel. And they got by on their merit. And so I think what a lot of this democratic media does is that it allows for merit to shine through. But there's a big but.
One thing I did want to add to that before you keep going, though, is I didn't mean to say that it's not so much that the content itself isn't something that people would necessarily or should necessarily enjoy. What I'm sort of getting at, though, is that the popularity of content that's out there isn't necessarily what's in the public's best interest. Like that's not what we're
That was
good
what
at
I wanted to
evaluating.
That's what I wanted to get at, because I'm talking about merit, and a lot of the channels I like are good at what they do. Like I have some gaming channels, I have a couple of philosophy channels. I've got just some topics that I'm interested in. The Tank Museum, for some reason, has amazing content if you're interested on tanks. But that's the thing. They're looking for their audience. They know that some people are going to want to watch stuff about tanks because tanks are cool. But the problem is that I'm not the normal audience. What you get, companies coming in knowing what to do, and then they put stuff on the front page with stuff that random people are going to unhealthily consume in an unhealthy way. And you get like clickbait stuff um and just junk. There's just so much
But it's worse than that. There's actually outright misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are studies that get published about that make correlative errors, like errors in judgment in the studies themselves. And then when it's brought to light, the publishers don't publish the corrections, or they'll sneak it in on like a back page after making it a headline news. So people run away from it thinking that they know something new from a study, when in reality, even the publisher knows that it was false and they're not admitting to it.
Right.
Or they're not.
Yeah, and like you get like National Enquirer bullshit, which was like you believed it, but they're doing it with a straight face.
No, like they do it with like medicine and stuff too. Like they'll say people should be moved right after they have a stroke. They should get up and walk around because it'll help them recover from their stroke. That's patently false. But they had a study done that was misinterpreting the data. Sometimes it's outright falsified data, like that guy in Japan who published he got an award for the most publications in Nature magazine or whatever, which is the most reputable Nature science journal publication there is. And this dude completely fraudulated or defrauded the system.
Yeah.
And there's no correction done except for like a liner note like 3 months later that nobody notices. But that type of stuff could be really easily done on YouTube, and it's not. There could be a whole channel just for corrections and that type of news, or just for peer-reviewed research, and say, hey, community, if you guys want to publish a paper under your name and get some practice, here's are all the things that we need people to peer review. But they don't do it. They play gatekeepers at the publishers direct, and nobody else has access to these sources.
Could you imagine if someone like you have like holistic health and just woo medicine, and they go online, this is close to my heart, but they go online and they start telling you to drink colloidal silver or something, and this is a water solution that you can make at home, and it's supposed to cure lots of stuff. And then you turn blue, and a lot of people online are like typing the benefits of colloidal silver, and you pick one that has like Buddhist imagery on it, and you'll probably be right in there, and you'll hear a ton of misinformation. And
ivermectin's a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Like, and absolutely no evidence whatsoever what they're talking about.
And
but like there are entire books written on this.
Example. I don't know if I'm gonna go into it.
Reading. That's what I'm getting at. People just don't even care to know the truth.
So I don't really.
We can't even trust ourselves to filter our filters.
Right. I don't really mind so much if people go online and say wrong things. What I mind is when you go online, and the worst offender right now for me that just hits me right here is the Tolkien Society. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd. I'm wanting to get a Lord of the Rings scholar on here. Chris doesn't care so much, but I do. No, but the books were amazing. They're amazing pieces of literature. And the Tolkien Society is kind of like the society that manages Tolkien's scholarly heritage or something. They're pretty much just a big fan club. But what they do is they hold lectures because, on like English literature, on like Germanic literature, on that kind of thing. And so, but what they did in the last round of lectures, where they were all completely and utterly woke. So let me just pull some of these up, right? I'll read you guys some titles. If it loads, God forbid it load. So what they do is they're going up and they're saying stuff that has nothing to do with here we go, with what like Lord of the Rings has, because you have one projecting Indian myths, culture, and history into Tolkien's worlds. Okay, well, why? Translation is a means of representation of diversity. Destabilizing cis hetero and amata-normativity in the works of Tolkien. Visions of iconographies, questions of the castle in Lord of the Rings, and multiple Chinese, like, okay, that one's actually kind of interesting. Here we go. Queer atheists, agnostic, and animists. Oh my. This is not anything to do with the spirit of Tolkien's works. They're just deconstructing it to turn into something. Oh, here we go. They have a picture of Ibram X. Kendi, who is the king of what we're talking about. The Losloth, indigeneity, identity, and anti-racism in Lord of the Rings. That has nothing to do with Lord of the Rings. They're just saying stuff. Now, the problem is that I can go on and say, I can watch this, come up with counter arguments. They're allowed to say stuff like this. They're allowed to be woke as heck. I'm not telling people that they can't be woke. I'm just saying you shouldn't be. But the comments are turned off for every single video. And it's the whole idea that this is a society of academics that invites academics to talk and discuss. And then they put their thing online, and then they don't allow any discussion. That's regressive. I don't have any other word for it. That's a regression.
How many years do people have to suffer before we're allowed to talk about Palestine? Like, it's absolutely insane that the whole world can't get together and figure out a solution together. Mm-hmm. Like, we're not allowed to speak about it. It's taboo. We're not allowed to speak about Muslims. We're not allowed to speak about Hindus. Like, caste system in India is wrong.
I talk about them all the time.
Let's find a way to fix it, though. You know what I mean? Like, there's no reason to make a glass, what do you call that? Like the Iron Dome or whatever around certain subjects. Because then you're creating an authority who gets to choose which subjects are sacrosanct and which ones aren't.
Right.
And
that's just why
you're just creating the problem that you're trying to avoid. You're creating a situation of a person in power with authority over people's ideas and expression. And that's literally the thing that you're claiming everybody else is abusing you with. Like,
that's literally Ibram X. Kendi's shtick. He's like the anti-racism guy. And he's like, his whole thing is like, you need to be anti-racist by being discriminatory against white people. And I'm just like, so I'm not allowed to criticize that? No, because you're white. It's like, oh, I guess I'm damned if I do. Why am I not allowed to talk about this? Because you're a colonializer. It's like, I'm Slavic.
But even if you were, you're not allowed to be. Like, if you went outside today and tried to be racist, everybody would shoot you down.
Yeah.
Nobody would follow you.
My neighbors on that side are Indian, and the neighbors on that side are indigenous, and there's black people across the road. Why? How? Like, they're just my neighbors. Like, and if I was racist to them, I want to be a good neighbor because we all can look out for each. Like, there's more. Okay, I'm getting into a digression here, but there's more benefit. There's no, like, okay, sorry, I'm arguing from a position of cynicism. Well, like, I could just go out and be racist to people as if it would give me some kind of boon. I can't.
And the thing is, for the very, very select few people who don't have empathy, those psychopaths and sociopaths of the world, you're not going to fix them. You are not going to change a single thing by forcing them to speak differently in public. All you're going to do is reinforce the small beliefs that stupid or ignorant people have because nobody's allowed to say otherwise. They never hear the opposite. So they think there's a conspiracy. And then they storm the Capitol because they're ignorant.
Well, which is why I can't.
I think they're doing the right thing, being patriots, because that's what you show them in movies.
Well, I think the better example would be flat earthers, which I honestly can't.
All of Alex Jones. All of it is people who are ignorant and scared.
Yeah, but flat earthers it's a ridiculous thing. I don't care about it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear anti flat earth. I don't want to hear pro flat earth. I don't want to hear anything about it. It's
Neither do I.
it's-
That's why I'm trying to change the subject.
No, but the thing is that I'm not going to get into flat earthing. I promise.
Thank you.
The only thing I care, like, I know the earth is the shape it is, and because they do the experiments in like grade 4 and they show you the sticks and stuff like that. But
you can do an experiment in your backyard. It's really easy. You just need a sundial and a ladder.
Yeah, you stick in a watch. But the thing is that you're not going to, if people actually are true believers of something ridiculous, you're not going to be able to change their mind. And you can try and you can have the discussion with other people, but if you find a true believer of something stupid, you have to just let it go and ignore it. You have to just be like, that's dumb, unless it affects your own life. If, you know, a bunch of flat earthers come to your door and say the earth is flat, do the thing, the earth is flat, like, I don't know, maybe do the hand thing like this, and then you just be like, no, go away. But if it's, you can just know, because there's something that we're definitely ignoring as a society, is that not everyone's brains are created equal. Some people just are going to be, and some people personality wise are going to be more susceptible than others. And I just got canceled. So anyway, I'm going to keep talking.
No, but it's true. Like, not everybody's an academic. I wasn't made for school. Like, it doesn't mean I'm a bad person or I'm stupid. I'm just not built for taking tests.
No, and you don't need a plumber to be like savvy in, you know, how to do, you know, complex theoretical physics. In fact, a plumber will be like, I'm just a plumber, I plumb, I'm going to go home to my family. I'm like, dude, that's Zen. And so I love it.
But the thing is, those types of people are also more effective at menial work. And I don't mean to say that to degrade them. I mean to say that we have utilities and services like that need to get done. You don't want somebody who hates their job cleaning your sewage out of your drinking water. You want somebody who goes to work and like is just a noble profession to clean poop out of water.
Right.
You need people like that. You absolutely want people to be proud of their work.
Right. And if they happen to be reading an audiobook while they're doing your drywall, more power to them.
Yeah.
Like, we just kind of have to let people be people. And I think a lot of what we are dealing with in the media and on like YouTube and stuff like that with all this new media is that we're not used to seeing all these people, just like in the 18th century, we're not used to seeing all these people on the other side. Whoa, I didn't know the people on the other side thought that. And it's like, and then the thing is that it's the same on the other side. All the people on the other side would be like, what? I didn't know all the people on the other side were like that. And then they all hear each other and they're all like, and then you just hear this big cry from both sides being like, you're an idiot. And guess what? Everyone is an idiot. And we have to accept that and move on. But I think that, okay, I'm saying that, but what I'm saying is we need to come at this, at everything we're encountering, from at once a position of ignorance. Maybe they could have something right about them. Even those crazies across the aisle, doesn't matter what side you're on, and hear them out. Because the thing is that if you agree with them, you can be like, and this is kind of that, I'm pretty much just arguing for grace, but you can say, that's a good point. And if you disagree with them, you can say, let me tell you why you're an idiot. And you can have an actual discussion. And the thing about getting back to the medium that we're talking about is that with the democratized media, you can actually sit down and not just be like, so-and-so said this guy was dumb, so-and-so said this guy was dumb. You can actually sit down and be like, okay, let me explain why, instead of just only having time for ad hominem or an attack, or just calling you a Democrat, or just calling you a liberal, these words that don't mean anything when you zoom out. So,
but it's just the same as the words they use to describe those words, like woke. Woke is empty, it's hollow, it's shallow. It means absolutely nothing other than the fact that you think you're better than someone else. If you're woke, wake someone up. Say the words that are proof and evidence. Convince them. Use your brain. Like, they talk about, I'm such a high IQ individual or whatever, but like, you know, IQ has nothing to do with higher intelligence. It's a test of retardation. Like, you're proving your own stupidity in your argument and your approach. But this is what we're glorifying in our media. This is the type of response that we're actually rewarding. We're rewarding Alex Jones for selling colloidal silver to flat earthers rather than accept on his show a PhD of any sort. Like any sort whatsoever you'd never seen on Alex Jones' show. You'll have people who call themselves doctors who never got a doctorate. Like, you've got universities like Phoenix University that are gone bankrupt because all they're doing is taking money, issuing fake, certifications or credentials or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not revoking any of the people who are claiming they got them.
Okay, stay on that track.
Yeah.
I'm just fact checked you, and I think you might have made it up, but you were right.
What?
Alex Jones was selling colloidal silver toothpaste.
Oh, I know.
I thought you were just taking two things.
That.
I thought so. Just in case you don't know, he wasn't just putting two of the things we were talking about before together. This
is just how my brain works.
Yeah.
I connect things. That's why I'm not good at school, but I'm good with markets.
Mm-hmm.
Markets are dynamic systems. That's why I'm not good at programming. I just enjoy it because you can link dynamic systems together in program.
Mm-hmm.
But the point I'm getting at, though, is it's not just Alex Jones and it's not just his followers and it's not just Trumpers and it's not just anti-vaxxers. The problem is our society. We're rewarding collectively, even in the scientific community, the wrong types of behaviors and practices. We're rewarding the wrong types of behaviors in news by giving them clicks and views and having a click and view model for an information system. That's not how information works.
Right.
You don't spread knowledge. Like, for instance, with COVID, you hear every single day on every local news station across the entire planet, the entire civilized world is listening. You think anybody's learned even first-year statistics in the last 2 years of hourly, daily updates of numbers?
No.
Nobody was taught anything about statistics.
Well,
Nobody knows anything about a p-value.
And it's not even that, like, they're giving you all the data right up front, so you can put it into graphs and organize the graphs, and they're actually giving you quite a bit of information.
But they don't
whether
tell
or not
you
it's accurate to
scrutinize
actually put
the
it together.
scale.
No, they're telling you, trust us, we are the authority. Planet goes by, and the
But it's
news
worse.
cycle starts.
This is the worst ever, or
Yeah.
this is a 5,000% increase from this time last year. Like,
I
how
think-
irrelevant is that number? An increase on an increase.
Yeah,
Like,
and
growth rates.
well, that's the one of the other things is that when you sensationalize this, and I noticed this when I was traveling for Christmas, is that the opinions of people started to change over the last year from previous Christmas about coronavirus, because everyone last year was just like, oh, coronavirus, and this year it's just like, I don't give a flying F. Like, people from every side of spectrum were just like, I don't care about COVID. So what's happening isn't that, like, people are just COVID fatigue, which is just happening, but you get the same thing with, like, the Star Wars movies, but where you just inundate the media landscape with one thing of information when there is more happening in the world than just COVID.
And there are more stories than just Star Wars to be produced.
Yeah.
And Marvel. Like, the same shit over and over and over again.
Please.
And
And
do you know how many writers have been sitting at home desperate to get their screenplays to get, like, a low budget $50,000 movie done? They could be publishing hundreds of thousands of movies for the money they spend on a movie nobody wants to watch, but they have to because nothing else is out.
right, and you might end up just, one of them might be an absolute gem.
Yeah. But, like, as a society and a culture, shouldn't we appreciate the 100,000 stories more than the one that nobody really remembers? Like, tell me which Spider-Man is which. Like, you could probably know based on the actor and not the plot.
Yeah, we're
But that's the same
actually
with the
watching the
Justice League.
Spider-Man movies right
Tell me
now.
what Justice League's plot line was different from the other Justice Leagues.
I don't know. Bad guy got hit in the face a lot.
Yeah, and I get that it's just fun and it's stupid and gratuitously violent and whatever. I enjoy violence too. But when that's all you're producing as a movie studio, you got a fucking problem.
Right. Well, it's when, I guess that's an example of the money committee making decisions for the people who are doing it. Like right now,
a rehash is a safer bet economically
Now, I'm
than
not comparing
anything else.
us to Marvel,
No.
but what we're doing here is we're free to say whatever we want, within the bounds of polite society. I can, which are,
And my authoritarian editing control,
yes, uh,
which I
in my,
clearly exercise.
just please edit out the
We're like,
burps.
fuck it, it's good enough. Like,
Yeah. There's actually, when I see a lot of YouTubers who don't have like cartoon stuff going on, a lot of them seems to just get it out there. But that's because the point of what we're doing is the conversation. That's our product,
I skip
guess.
intros after the third time I've seen them anyway. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
who sits through a fucking intro?
Yeah. And to be fair, our intros suck. But
Even TV shows that I like, I don't watch the intros after the third episode. I'm like, oh, I know exactly how long it takes, and I skip forward.
unless it's an absolute banger, but
No,
that's
none of them.
rare. But like what we're doing is like, we don't have someone behind us telling us, don't say this or you're gonna get canceled, or don't say this or you're gonna lose funding, don't say this or you're gonna, the Twitter mob will have this, because we're trying to bring what we know to be real in our world onto your world. We're not doing, okay, it's gonna be a weird argument, but we're not living in the infosphere. We're projecting the real world into the infosphere, so so it can translate our reality into yours. So I think what a lot of people are doing, and a lot of what the problem is that they're not free because they're living in that digital environment. We're living through the digital environment. When you live on Twitter, when you live on CNN, when you live on,
they're in the Matrix.
yeah. Well, am I saying like that? No.
No,
well, the thing is that
what it is. The things that they say, they're victims of. That's the irony of it. That's what makes me think it's so stupid to hear it.
But the thing about the Matrix is that we're not born in the Matrix. We're born in the real world and then choose to go into the Matrix
as fun, fanciful fantasy.
Yeah, like
it's a joke.
And this is the same problem as I think a lot of people have on, like, with video games. You can play too many of them, and it can ruin your life. But when you're on social media, when you're on watching like YouTube poop, rather than actual content, then you're like, it's rotting these kids' brain. But no, there are actual deleterious effects to watching content in such a way that, like, that short-term gratification content and short-term gratification news content, it doesn't do a lot of good. Like, there's a lot of studies coming out about how this is negatively affecting our psyches. And so, like anything,
even like the long-term effects, like the structure of your brain forming patterns that are dedicated solely to the one thing that you're interested in.
Yeah,
that has long-term consequences.
Right. Like one of the creators of Facebook had he had a conversation. What do they call those? Interview on some universities. Words are hard.
Yeah.
He had an interview on with a university class. It was like a media journalism school, and it was a really interesting interview. And he essentially said, "Get off of Facebook." Like,
we have proof and evidence. Well, not proof, but there's evidence suggesting that it's harmful, physically, like health-wise harmful.
Everyone should, like, it should ring an alarm in everyone's head. Like, okay, if the leader of a, I don't know, ice cream company goes out and buys their, it's like, hey, let's go get ice cream. It's like, oh, Dad, you're just gonna take us to work, haha. But then they go get ice cream. Now, leaders of Facebook and Twitter and Imager, and I don't know all of them yet. They don't let for some reason, the majority of them don't let their children use these platforms. That seems very suspicious. And we should all, like, if they're not using their own product, they're not getting high on their own stash, maybe there's something wrong with that. And that's,
Eminem said that in one of his songs. I wouldn't let my daughter listen to my music either. He's like, I'm not a bad parent. Why would I let my daughter listen to my music?
Yeah. And so it needs to be handled in like properly. Now, I used to be on I used to have Imager. I deleted it cuz I noticed that it was making me it was like making me politically extremist on certain things, and I thought it was weird. So I just deleted it like a couple Christmases ago, and it's just instantly I was more balanced. And I think
I just think more clearly when I'm not listening to garbage. Like when I
yeah,
don't constantly have to be like, that's insane, that's stupid. Why did I hear that? And then I'm remembering the stupid, insane things. Like
mhm,
get out of like I'd rather store those those brain cells and those memories for things that are real,
mhm.
you know? Because
And
you real things affect your life. The way you make judgment calls and split decisions and the way you raise kids or interact with people, the way you work, like the money you earn in your lifetime is
right.
related to the things you learn during your lifetime. If you're learning a whole bunch of stuff that has no application in the real world, and in the process of so doing, you're avoiding things that would actually help you,
This
like
is this is why I'm like so skeptical. Like exactly that is why I'm kind of afraid of. I'm not afraid. Well, I'm a bit afraid. I guess fear is a good enough emotion to call it. Of this new metaverse thing that Facebook's coming up with. Like you living online with a headset constantly, kind of Ready Player One style. And Ready Player One sounded good. I don't. It's not. Doesn't seem like a book that you would have read.
it was an anime first.
I think it was a no. It was a book first, and then it was a movie. It's a Western thing.
I'm
And
pretty sure it was an anime first. I saw the anime.
it's an anime. You might be thinking
Yeah.
of something else.
But
But
anyway,
okay. So the premise is that the world's a um, a shirt hole, and everyone lives on this thing called Oasis, and they have to hunt for a treasure in the digital world. And everyone lives on the digital world because everyone's got these things, and they go to school in them, kind of COVID style. But and so they are all just kind of living in these trailers stacked upon like going up because they don't need to live anywhere because they just buy everything on there. This is kind of why NFTs are taking off because they want a lot of well, plus the fact that everyone's stupid. But like Nike just signed a deal to sell digital shoes on the digital world that everyone's going to be interacting in that has connections to the real life. You can spend actual money in this metaverse. And that just to me is just people. The reason I'm kind of afraid of it is because this stuff, you have this world that everyone's going to want to live in and like live in, not like live in like we're living here because it's better. You can be whatever you want. You can be whatever gender you want and make up your own gender like the rest of the idiots. And you can be whatever you want. It doesn't have any relation to what you are in the real world, but the real world is still going to be supporting that. And so you're still going to need electricians and engineers and all these things doing actual work in the real world. And
I say let them, because those people aren't fit to run the world, and they're running the world
ooh,
right now.
ooh, oh,
No, I'm
so
serious.
no,
I
I
don't
know.
want those people in charge of my safety or my health or my security or my country or diplomacy or my finances. I don't want those people to have anything to do with anything that matters to me
So
and my
deliciously
family.
harsh. No, I agree.
No, I want them to be happy and live fulfilling lives on the metaverse as much as they want.
Mhm.
I'll build and help them build robots to do all the farming and shit for them so that they have food to eat.
Mm,
But I
poop
don't
tubes.
want them running our government.
No.
I don't want them anywhere near our finances. I
Well,
don't
and
want them
that's
flying planes or designing robots that have guns on them because they just didn't think that it would glitch. Like, I don't want these people doing anything of value.
well, you're lucky because they won't really produce anything of value.
Right.
Oh man, this is
And
so
and
harsh.
in the metaverse, you're basically putting children in a pen. And
Mhm.
that's fine. You don't want kids to get hurt. That's not why you put them and close them off, and it's so that they don't fall down the stairs.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want these people hurting themselves. They can't clearly do anything for themselves. Like they don't cook, they don't clean, they don't, whatever. If they're going to be sitting on the metaverse their whole lives, they clearly don't read, they clearly don't exercise.
Well,
Like
and
to
we
go to
have
that extreme, to be living in the metaverse, you would have to be so ignorant of reality or so addicted to it. I would help the people who are addicted to it, but everybody else who couldn't care less, I don't
yeah.
think they have any need to not be in the metaverse.
Well, you ever try and like, I don't know, you have that friend who plays like an online game way too much, and then that's their life, and they come and you're sitting there with your friends and you talk about like, yeah, I just got a raise, I should be able to afford that, that extra thing now, and blah blah blah. You're talking about like real life stuff, and they come in and be like, yo, I just got this, I got the sword of infinite, this or that, and you're like, cool. But like, it's a game, which is a game, and like we're allowed to play games and have fun, but when the game becomes real life, I think the part of the problem is that with this new technology, with something like Twitter, people used to play games all the time. Like you get together and adults and play hockey and stuff like that, and it's a social thing. But when you've made politics into a game, when you've made science and discourse into a game, like that, where you're playing the game of politics, when you go and fight Twitter mobs and stuff. And I think that when you get enough people doing it, a lot of what happens is what they think is real becomes policy. And I think that's a big danger, because you get people, or like Twitter mobs. I think the other end of the spectrum would be Facebook.
Well, the apes with that
Apes.
whole GameSpot.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened
Perfect
with
example of that.
Okay, explain.
A whole bunch of people who know nothing about economics all decided to start buying shares.
Okay.
Because the hedge fund managers told them we're gonna crush your precious video game company. And they were all like, well, I can afford one share and 100 other million people can afford one share. Everybody bought one share. When, not exactly one, but
Yeah.
yeah, some people only put $10 in, some people put it 10,000 in because they could afford it. But the point is, these people are doing what you're saying. They're rallying together against a nonsense cause of saving a gaming company when all games are online now.
Yeah, and they didn't know how it worked, so it ended up driving up the price, and everyone's like,
yeah. And the only
what?
people who benefited were the platform who sold them all the shares.
Yeah.
Like it hurt themselves. They're all paying from the same pool of money.
To be fair, if you're only putting $100 down, a lot of us have spent $100 a lot stupider than a big
but
practical
all
joke.
of your profit
But
at somebody else's expense, and that person was necessarily less informed than they should have been.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. The problem is they went out and fell down the stairs because they weren't put in a pen.
Yeah. But
and I'm not saying it to be mean. I'm saying like literally people lost a lot of money. And the people who made money only made money because the people who fell downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
There was no other money to get. That's why the stock was falling in value.
Right, because
GameStop is less and less every day.
An outdated economic technology. It's
the thing is, it didn't have.
It's the same like my old video store.
It didn't have inventory. It didn't have customers. The malls were closed. COVID was happening.
It killed a company that needed to die anyways.
Yeah, it is the same with cryptos. People are spending tons of money on cryptos or mining cryptos and spending tons of energy. Well, meanwhile, like there's blackouts in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Like blackouts killed people, and you're mining fucking crypto because they didn't have power and you had power. You're hurting people by being dumb. Like that's a serious problem, and they're poisoning our culture too. The movies that are coming out aren't just bad, so who cares? I don't watch them. That's like a whole generation's worth of art that is going unnoticed and unfulfilled.
Right, and this is that's the same thing that happens on YouTube with when you sign out of your thing and you look at YouTube front page, you see all these terrible things that you wouldn't enjoy watching, but you want to click on them because hot chick or something, and then
kitty cats.
Yeah, kitty cats. Now, at 11:30 at night, when I'm just laying there going, I can't sleep with my wife, Cat videos are pretty effective.
Time and place. Yeah.
Time and place. Yeah. But there's the media is telling us this is the best movie, and then like honestly, those are the most blatant lies ever, because you see like the new Star Trek comes out. This is the first female lead. This is the first like black lead that has ever been in Star Trek, and everyone who's been watching Star Trek forever has been like, those are both very incorrect.
Yeah.
Like they're blatantly lies just to sell them to a certain group of people who'll be like, did you know? And then they'll repeat it to their friends, and they'll all be like, we need to watch this. This is something so wonderful. It's happening in our society. It's just like, dude, it's just Star Trek.
Or Gatorade's going to make you a better athlete.
Yeah.
Peloton's going to make your exercise better. No, you just had to try that hard without Peloton.
Yeah. And
like, I don't care
power
that people
to you
like
if you have
Peloton, but
tricks.
to think they have to get a payment plan that's 24 months, 0% interest on like a $5,000 piece of equipment just to get fit. No, it's effort. Don't advertise to these dumb people that they can buy their way into good health.
I think the difference, okay, so I think I'm coming to a bit of a head here, but what we're looking at is we have a group of people that are outsourcing not their decision making, but their sense of truth and lie to other places, whereas other media is just trying to find truth and understands that they know shit. And so like what we're trying to do here is we're trying to be as truthful as possible. We're aware that we might screw up. And so when
we're trying to incite the conversation.
Right.
That's the difference.
Well, we're having a conversation. We're trying to incite more conversation.
Yeah.
And so when you outsource the truth to, just authorities. Now, some things I outsource my truth to. And you're allowed to use authorities for things. Like in debating, we call that ethos, where you rely on, logos is, when you rely on like data and logic and, you're creating the argument yourself. Ethos is you're relying on other arguments. I'm not going to be able to explain a nuclear reaction based on my own logic. I need to borrow logic.
Yeah, I think I proved that in our nuclear episode.
Yeah. So you need authority for some things. You need to outsource your brain a bit because we are all better as a group of individuals. And then the problem is when you get to pathos, which is literally just you wouldn't hurt a child, would you? You're looking for an emotional response. And using these responsibly, you get, good journalism, you get good politics, you get, well, as good as it can be, you get good stories, you get good things, but you don't have to make a good thing if you just convince people that they watched a good movie. And so like, it was a great movie. And then you say like, I've left a theater one time going like, that movie is crap. And everyone else was like, no, you can't say that. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, I'm willing to admit that, beauty is in the eye of the beholder a bit, but that movie was crap. And they don't even want to hear it because it goes against what they've been told, because they don't want to think for themselves. They've been told this is a good movie. They've been told that this movie is, the best thing since sliced bread. And I go in and I'm critical of it. And now it places me in another position. Now this could be changed from, put a political party in there, put any news media outlet on there. And we're being told the whole thing is, does this piece of information allow you or let you, think for yourself in a critical way? Are you allowed to criticize it without being like lambasted by a bunch of supporters? So we're not going to have fangirls going like, if you make fun of Chris and Jordan, we're going to burn your house down.
That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, it'd be nice. I got the little FG. No. How dare you? And they have like Jordan with glasses, Jordan without glasses, fan groups, and they like go to war with each other.
Like, the key indications are always, 100,000 people said this is good. And like, that's the way they're promoting their product.
So
by telling you how many people like something.
You can get 100,000 idiots together easy.
Yeah, if you pay enough money and tell each person $1 to watch our video, a free dollar for 5 seconds of their life, for
Yeah.
sure, anybody would take it. It
Mhm.
literally just costs money to get eyes.
Yeah, I don't even have to look at the screen while I'm doing it. It just has to be on my screen. I have to pretend to watch it.
But like, but
yeah.
like they do it with food too. Like they'll tell
Yes.
people that their food is fresh smelling, fresh tasting, fresh looking. You know what I mean? Like
Well, it's
they'll be exact and specific with their words so that they're not technically lying.
it's like a
But
can that says fresh on it. It's like, the
I
can
like
fresh
when
metal.
when they're talking about what's safe for consumption, like preservatives or whatever, they're saying this can will not kill you if you eat it. But if you eat this can and those same preservatives in the same concentration are in another food, that can has no idea what you eat next.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't being told to think about what they're consuming. They're just saying, well, they wouldn't sell it if it wasn't safe. Well, if you eat Kraft dinner 3 times a day, it will kill you. Like literally, it will poison you.
What was that guy in they did the movie Super Size Me where he ate
Yeah.
only McDonald's for
But
a
even
month and
that's
his
more
doctor
healthy
was
than
like,
Kraft dinner. 'Cause there's lettuce and shit in there. There's bread, there's a bit of protein, there's grease. Protein can be like resynthesized into whatever else you need. So
Mhm.
you're okay with a little bit of protein in your diet. You can kind of get by, but
Like
there's zero in Kraft dinner.
bacon
It's
bits,
just
which are just
carbs.
cardboard with flavoring on it. Like,
Yeah, with powdered flavoring,
mhm.
which isn't real. It's synthetic.
It's literally just you're eating trees.
But like that shit's dangerous because people are feeding that to their kids and their kids don't know any better. And then
Mhm.
they grow up as adults thinking that's normal. Like
Yeah.
that's a health crisis that spans generations. We pay for it.
Right.
30 years later, when that kid has diabetes and sitting in the hospital, we're paying for that. Not the kid who can't work. Like it actually matters to us what other people receive as information from advertising.
Right.
Or embedded ads in articles that look like ads. Like I've talked about this before, but native advertising should be flat out illegal. Like
Oh, yeah.
nobody's best interest is served by lying to people about editorials or commercials that look like editorials. That doesn't
like
help anybody.
China taking out ads in the New York Times or something or whatever paper. They do this a lot where they'll just be like a big ad, like newspaper. It'll look like a newspaper article, but it'll just be Chinese propaganda made to look like the New York Times wrote it. And the New York Times will be like, it's money. And so the New York Times is desperate. So,
Or they'll try and be fair and balanced and they'll say, oh, well, this is our communist piece. We just had
Yes.
to throw one in and we just happened to get paid for it.
Yeah.
Like,
It's socialism with Chinese characteristics, Chris. Which is also this, but okay, and I think this
it's
is
capitalism with dictator characteristics. It's not socialism or communism. It's
believe the
all
word for that
capitalism
is-
and all dictator.
I believe the word for
Period.
that is fascism.
Yeah.
But I think the juxtaposition there is good because what we can do in our society and what we allow our citizens to do and
Object.
we can object and we can be I don't want to say critical, but we can think. We're allowed to think through. We're allowed to say nay to anything we see. We're allowed to, and we can say whatever we want as long as we can back it up. Because it was like, oh, you wouldn't yell, fire in a movie theater. It's like, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. That's a bad argument because that's not what the discourse is about. The free speech thing is all about you being able to say, I think this, and then somebody coming up to you and be like, yes, well, you're an idiot, and here's why. And so in that voice, you have to use that voice.
Yeah, with a monocle.
Yeah. No. But 2 monocles.
You just like switch them for effect.
Yeah. We did have a guy in one class who did get a monocle, and he answered a question for the teacher and just was like, well, and put on the monocle, and the teacher lost his. The teacher was just like, are you serious right now? But he wore it in the entire class. But we have this ability where we can think freely for ourselves, and we're actually encouraged. And the way our society is set up, society is just better if everyone's just thinking for themselves and being critical of everything and coming to their own conclusions. And what we have to be wary of is when some company, government, anything, person, your boss tells you, no, don't think about it, just do. And this is like food marketing is like, don't do this, or like, don't eat fat's bad for you. Meanwhile, you need fat. Don't eat salt. You need,
Meanwhile,
salt.
you need salt because your heart won't beat if it doesn't have electronic impulses.
Well, you mentioned Gatorade, but like I was living in Ottawa, and the humidity was so bad there, and it was like 45 degrees one day, and I was going out for a bike ride. I didn't need water. I needed Gatorade.
Valid use of Gatorade, right?
Valid, yeah. And so
why aren't the commercials about that instead of like weightlifting? Like, I don't get it. There's a use for it.
Yeah, and it's like it's not a bad product. And like if you see them drinking Gatorade, the hockey players are drinking Gatorade. You know how hard those guys are. They need it.
They're sweating buckets.
And so I can think critically. I'm allowed as a free citizen to say, no, this company's pulling my chain. I'm not going to buy their stuff. And no government is going to, the Chinese government's not going to come by and be like, nope, you have to do this, or you have to buy your little red book, or you have to buy Mein Kampf or something, or you have to buy a Bible and whatever. And I think that's the crux of it, is we have this wonderful tool, and which I've kind of called over the course of this time, this podcast, the democratized, democratized media. Which I mean by democratized means everyone, or as many people as possible, have access, and not to just listen, but to engage. And we have this, and it's wonderful and it's beautiful, but it puts a lot more responsibility on the individual. And I hope this discussion has helped you see the pitfalls, but I think thinking for yourself and when someone makes any assertion, they have to back it up with proof, whatever that proof is, with logic, even if they can make a good emotional argument. But you have to make the people who are talking to you back whatever they are saying up. That includes us. So I guess today's comments, go be critical of us, and we'll try and answer it. Or if you call us out on something and we're wrong, we'll eat that humble pie, because that's how this is supposed to work. So I think that's my last word. Anything from you, Chris?
That's all I got.
Chris's voice has died. The one last thing, Chris's voice is gone, so I'll get into this. So Chris would like to plug Bruce Lipton, PhD, The Biology of Belief, which pretty much, I guess, gets into exactly what we are reading at. So Unleashing the Power of Consciousness, Matter, and Miracles. I'm going to need a little more.
No, that's it. Just mention it. That was my final comment. I just can't speak.
Okay. Yeah. So
I would suggest everybody read it. That's all.
Yeah. Give that one a look. I'm probably going to give that one a look. I'll come back with a criticism, because like I said, that's what we got to do. Don't just be like, I read this book. This is a great book, but everything is flawed in its own way. So don't just take it at face value.
Yeah. Especially Plato and all them too. Like, I love philosophy, but it's not because I agree with them all.
Plato's a bit of a fascist.
Yeah. Yeah, he was total and a bigot. And
well, I swear, if Plato was living in the 20th century, he would have been a eugenicist. He'd have been like, yes, but what if we didn't have the stupid people? And we were all philosophers.
Yeah.
But
the point is, thinking about the stuff he said is what's important.
Yeah, Aristotle I like a bit better, because he was more he was more scientific. He's like, what even is everything around me? And then he'd go for walks and look at it.
There would have been no Aristotle without Plato. That's pretty much, well, it's counterfactual, but it's pretty much guaranteed.
Yeah, they kind of everyone. There's a
Technically
lot more
counterfactual.
guys, but they all are kind of playing off of each other. And
No, he literally taught him.
well, actually, okay, you know what? Yeah, well,
He was his
they
teacher.
yeah,
And he
but a
opened the
lot of what
academy.
was happening then was you had a lot of people who were freely allowed to discourse, and Plato and Aristotle wouldn't have been anybody if all the little other philosophers at the same time who were just sitting around thinking weren't like if nobody was keeping them in check and they were just able to say what was off the top of their head right off the bat, they wouldn't have been as good as they were, because
But they
Aristotle
also
says
relied
something.
on slavery to have all that free time. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, well, we're still getting better at that. We're doing better.
Oh, working on it.
We're working on it. We're doing better. We're doing better than China.
Better
And
than my voice is.
yeah. So
Thanks
to
for
save
putting up with me.
Chris's voice, we're gonna let you go. And thank you for listening to Frivolous Gravitas. Please check us out on the internet. It's somewhere out there. The RSS feed is going.
I hear you don't even have to dial in anymore.
No, you can just turn the sound off so it doesn't go bang, 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 bang. I just mute that. All right, before we end up on some weird other digression, we're gonna let you guys go, and we'll see you guys next week.
Feel free to cancel us.
Yeah, please do. Bring it on.
We'll publish downvotes too.
Yes, please. I think we had one. I think you might have done
that
it
was
though.
me.
Yeah. All right, bye.
Bye.